If writing to learn is something that cuts across disciplines, it's something that would apply to students in all colleges, not only in places that teach architecture or design or disciplines of the built environment. The situation is different when we're talking about professional communication and writing that pertains specifically to the disciplines. When we want to introduce to our students the kind of writing that they, as designers or architects, will have to do in their life as professionals, the focus is not only on the content that they're engaging with and on making sure that they're able to synthesize, they're able to convey it to their tutors appropriately. The focus is on teaching them how to approach any piece of writing, irrespective of genre, keeping in mind the message that they want to convey, but also the context, the occasion for which they are writing, and at the same time, the readership that they have in mind. This is the fundamental difference that we as tutors need to understand when we prescribe writing as a form of professional communication. When we introduce it, we assign it, and therefore we guide it and grade it as well. There's two situations we're all likely to have faced. One of them is the day of the jury. We all know it. Everyone is nervous. Everyone is shivering. Everyone is ready. They've got the best project, the most interesting, the better designed one. And yet, when it comes to talking to the jurors about it, they're lost. They don't know what to say, they don't know how to say it. They start talking about the entirety of their process, they're full of enthusiasm. They run out of time before telling people what the intention of their design was. And then you have the frustrating tutor like you and I on the margins looking at each other and saying, but why? Why is it that this person could not, for instance, start by telling the juror what their intention was all along? The question for us is actually, what is it that we expect of a good presentation? And have we told our students how to go about making a presentation like that? Because the things that to us seem intuitive or the things that are obvious the moment you see a thing badly done are not obvious to a student who's doing it for the first time or who's doing it for the nth time, really, but with no one articulating for them the strategy of the entire process. And this is something that students in our disciplines will have to do semester upon semester with new jurors, old jurors, mean jurors, nice jurors, and they will never actually realize to what an extent the grades that they're getting depend on the quality of their professional communication. The second similar situation is one in which we hear companies, we hear firms, smaller or bigger, complain that the portfolios that people are sending, fresh graduates or older graduates, they're just not good enough. It's not that the work is not good enough, it's that the structuring of the portfolio doesn't speak about their skills. It's that their cover letters seem careless or seem just badly drafted. Is that they don't say anything. And once again, the question is, should education at the undergraduate and at the postgraduate level not equip the students that we're working with to be able to actually represent themselves and their skills out there in the world? Here, similarly, there is strategy, there is technique to how somebody decides this is the first of my works that I want an employer to see. This is the first idea about me that I want them to have in an introduction. I mean, think about it. How many times have you actually seen a portfolio that doesn't have an introduction? That is just a long, long lineup of photo upon photo of projects in which nobody knows what I, as a professional, have contributed. Then what am I showing there? So when it comes to something like professional writing, the first question that we need to ask ourselves is, what do our students need to know in each discipline? There are things which are common, something like an introduction to an exhibition, because everyone will eventually exhibit their work somewhere. So we know that everybody needs to do that. There are also things which pertain to a specific discipline. something that a communication designer will have to do, but perhaps an architect will not, perhaps an urban designer will not. There are things like reports, for example, which may lend themselves more to a student of technology or a student of civil engineering, and perhaps an architect will use a different kind of report. They will have a report of their own, but the genre conventions, the strategies they employ might be different. So, the first thing to do as professionals is to have our own list handy, our own list that we are very familiar with, that tells us these are the five most important things that I want my students to know how to do by the time they're done with their undergraduate or with their postgraduate education. If we have these in mind, we can ask the second question that to me is most important, which is what does my course or what does my studio lend itself to? I might want my students to write a report, for example, but maybe in a mandatory course, that is not the best thing to ask. Maybe in a mandatory course, it would make more sense to ask the students to integrate the content, the knowledge, the substance of the course into their own manifesto. That is a genre that every architect loves, every architect should think more deeply about. A course is an opportunity to help the students develop that. If I have decided that I want my course to work with a professional genre, such as a manifesto, then I can take the next steps. The next steps would entail, firstly, knowing what that genre is, knowing when it works, for whom it works, to whom it speaks. Because unless I, as a tutor, am aware of all of that, it is impossible for me to explain it to the student, to know what to expect of them, to draft an assignment that is actually meaningful. And to end on another anecdotal note, how many times have we talked to each other, telling each other, oh, my students have not been able to submit a good essay? And then you ask, but what kind of essay was intended here? What kind of essay did we want? Only to realize that an essay was not necessary at all. That the piece of writing that we wanted was more like maybe what goes into your introduction on your blog, or maybe a project description, which is not an essay. So if we're asking the students for the wrong thing, we will obviously get the wrong thing. Then we cannot expect to grade it, and then we cannot blame the students for it. Setting the right intention, especially when it comes to something like professional writing, which does not even need to be sold, the students will be convinced from the very beginning that it's useful for them, is one of the most important tasks for ourselves to consider.